I am Joanna Fava. I'm a clinical psychologist with a private practice in Scarsdale, New York. That's kind of my base. My specialties are trauma and DBT. I've been doing DBT for 18 years now, and run about 6 groups a week for families and adolescents, adults, possibly couples in the future. Boot camps in the summer for college students. So lots of DBT all the time. And so you're gonna, if you've been to DBT or if you know anything about DBT, you're going to recognize some of the things that I'm talking about as they come from kind of this background in DBT or dialectical behavior therapy that I have. So welcome to everybody here. My talk today is really about increasing our awareness to decrease regret. So much of the time when clients come to me, they say, I need to get rid of emotions. Emotions get me in so much trouble. They cause all these problems in my relationships. And while I completely can validate that emotions have caused them a lot of suffering and pain and disruption, it's really the behaviors that those emotions pull us towards that are the real problems. The emotions are actually a superpower. That emotional sensitivity that people who come to DBT have, it makes them more compassionate, more passionate about things in their life, better listeners, good friends, just really kind of thoughtful people, insightful, empathic. And so it's not necessarily that emotional sensitivity, although I can absolutely recognize how that emotional sensitivity, and especially the invalidation that has come over the years, has made people feel like that is actually the problem. The problem are the behaviors that come from that emotion. And so what I'm hoping to do today is increase the awareness of right before a disruptive behavior happens, what I call key cues, and to be able to build our awareness of that so that we can change behaviors. And by changing those behaviors, we decrease the aftermath, which is all of this shame and regret that tends to spiral people further. Okay, so with that, going to see if this is working. There we go. Okay, so it all kind of starts with mindfulness. Mindfulness being awareness to the present moment. What thoughts am I having? What body sensations, emotions, judgments, memories, interpretations? What is going on right now in this moment? Am I feeling jealous? Am I getting hot? Is my stomach fluttering and I'm starting to notice feelings of anxiety, right? So what awareness can I have of this moment and what's going on? The more that I can be aware of what's going on, the better I'm going to be able to choose what to do next, right? And so if we can build awareness to the present moment through mindfulness, we can take that pause, observe what's happening. What I say, name it to tame it, right? So if we can name what's going on, then we can tame it. We can take back control of the moment. We can choose our response to whatever is happening in the moment instead of acting impulsively or reacting quickly. We actually get choice in what our response looks like, okay? So given that we're going to be focusing on disruptive behaviors that have caused problems, distress, disruption in our lives, I think it can be helpful to first create the framework that we want to do that. And so what I'd like to do is take a minute to guide us through a mindfulness practice. And the mindfulness I'd like to do is a loving kindness mindfulness. And the point of this is to increase our loving kindness towards ourselves, especially as we're going to be looking at disruptive behaviors. I want us to do that through a lens of acceptance and validation and loving kindness towards our experiences and what we're going through. So I'm going to ring our bell to get us started. What I say in my groups is the first bell is to kind of Notice anything pulling at your attention from the past, from the earlier in the day, other talks, other things. Notice that pull and gently bring yourself back to this moment. Second bell to notice anything pulling at you from the future, what you're going to have for dinner, what's going on this weekend, other things on the to-do list. Notice that pull to the future and bring yourself back to just this moment. And the third bell to take a breath, as each breath can only be right now. And what I'd like you to do is to just kind of get comfortable in your chair or wherever you are, sitting in a relaxed but straight posture, shoulders relaxed, allowing your hands to rest in your lap with palms open. And gently close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so, or gently gaze on something that isn't too distracting. Settling into awareness of your body and of your breath. Notice what's going on for you right now. Open to whatever you're experiencing in your body in this moment. And try to connect to your breath, noticing the rhythm as you inhale and exhale slowly. What I'd like to do is take a moment to try to cultivate some loving kindness, which is something that we all have within us. It's a natural capacity for loving kindness or unconditional friendship that is open, gentle, and supportive. It is looking at things with a compassionate heart. It's a wish that everyone be well. So to develop loving kindness towards yourself, I'd like you to try to allow your heart to be open to your basic goodness. Maybe remembering things that you have done that are kind or generous, or recalling your natural desire to be happy and not to suffer. And in cultivating this loving kindness, notice how it feels in your body to be sitting with compassion towards yourself. And try to wish yourself well wishes. I will give you some phrases, but you can also change them to something else that might feel more relevant to you right now. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be safe from both internal and external dangers. May I feel connected and at peace. May I May I accept myself as I am. May I be happy and healthy in both mind and body. May I know the joy of being alive. So repeating these words of friendship and kindness to yourself. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be safe from both internal and external dangers. May I feel connected and at peace. May I accept myself as I am. May I be happy and healthy in both mind and body. May I know the joy of being alive. And you can extend that loving kindness to others in your circle and your family and your support system, to others in the world. And sitting for a moment in the energy of loving kindness that you've just generated, noticing how that feels before we gently come back to this space. Okay, so I also want to offer the opportunity for people to just take a moment and share if you'd like to, if you feel comfortable doing so. If anybody wants to share their experience of trying to cultivate loving kindness for yourself. It's okay. Okay.
I'll say something quickly.
Go ahead, Virginia.
I did an MBSR class, and I have to say it was fabulous. I've always been kind of afraid, or really afraid, but sort of intimidated by actual meditation. And so having that, I've done DBT, so I've done mindfulness, but actually having that structure and being accountable to a class and having homework was awesome. And the loving kindness meditations were kind of difficult, but sort of transformative, or at least on the way to being transformative. So it was really a good experience, and I encourage anyone who's maybe interested to kind of look into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, what you're bringing up is the dialectic, right? That cultivating loving kindness or being kind towards ourselves is really difficult. Sometimes it feels foreign. We can be very kind and compassionate towards others in our life, or accepting of how they're doing, but not so much towards ourselves. So it can be very difficult and also rewarding at the same time, right? So, but it does take practice for sure, and it can be very, very hard to do. But since we're kind of going into looking at behaviors we don't like, I wanted to first kind of create a loving, compassionate, validating perspective and lens through which to be kind of looking at and exploring experiences of disruptive behaviors. So with that, kind of our objectives for today are to identify problematic behaviors that you want to change. I think it can be really helpful because I'm going to be breaking this apart and giving you a moment after each objective is reviewed to kind of jot down your own notes, or, pick apart a problematic behavior that you want to work on. So if you don't have paper, you may want to kind of grab something to write with or something to write on. And so our goals will be to identify a problematic behavior you want to change, understanding vulnerability factors that contribute to those disruptive behaviors, identifying what I call key cues that a disruptive urge is coming, and then developing a coping plan for what to do when you do notice that key cue, and then practicing. So I wanted to kind of give you all the story of TJ, which you may have read in kind of the description of this, but I think it helps to give it in real time. So before doing group practice and private practice, I worked in prisons and with people on parole and probation for 7 or 8 years. And when I was working in the prison system, I was working with TJ, who had been incarcerated for a violent offense. And different times throughout his stay, he was ended up extending his sentence because he would get into fights on the unit and new charges would be brought upon him, and his stay would then be extended. This was really distressing for TJ because he wanted to get back to his family and to his wife. And every time he had to call them and share that something had happened and therefore his sentence was elongated, he felt incredible regret, shame, disappointment, guilt. And so I was trying to bring DBT into the prison systems at this time. So I was doing behavior chains and skills groups and things like that, and increasing mindfulness. And so one thing that TJ and I have been working on was breaking down this behavior of getting into these fights with other inmates and what would happen, right? And so we would break it down. And what were his vulnerability factors, or what was happening that was making him more likely to engage in that, and he's in prison, so there's just kind of high fear, not exactly the most comfortable place. And so, you know, he was feeling kind of on guard all of the time, which is normal. Not getting great sleep, feeling kind of powerless, feeling like there were threats all around him. And then we worked on kind of breaking down what would happen right before he would knock somebody out. And he said, you know,
no, there's a whole nother bag in there that's.
I would notice that, you know, it was really difficult. Yeah, I'd notice my fists were clenched and it would be hard to breathe. My ears would get hot. I would be really flushed, like lots of different things that would come up from a sensory experience, right? His ears would be hot, his face would be flushed, his fist would be clenched, he would tighten up. He would have thoughts like, I got to get them before they get me. And so this was all happening right before he would then engage in physical aggression. And so we came up with a coping plan. Okay, the thing that's going to motivate you to not, you know, become assaultive is if you can remember your wife and your kids that you're trying to get back to. So the coping plan was, I'm going to leave the situation when I notice these key cues, this thought, these body sensations, I'm going to, you know, walk away and I'm going to look at pictures of my family. So we rehearse this, we practice this, we imagine this scenario over and over. So a couple, you know, days later, I'm on the unit talking to the corrections officers, just kind of, you know, some downtime, and I hear a scuffle break out with a bunch of inmates, and sure enough, TJ is right in the middle, and my heart sinks for him, and I'm like, oh no, here we go. He's gonna get his sentence extended. The whole situation is happening again. So now I feel you know, horrible for him. And all of a sudden he goes, my ears are hot, guard door. And he goes into his cell, guard shuts the door behind him. And I am literally like, oh my God, yes! And I'm like cheering. And the guard looks at me like, we got an extra cell for you, Joanna. Like, what is going on? You're losing it. And I am literally ecstatic because he did it. And I knew that after that, in our next session, he was going to feel pride. He was going to feel a sense of accomplishment, a sense of control over this situation that had continuously led to regret, guilt, shame, all of these things, right? So that's kind of where this started for me many years ago, of like trying to figure out for people or with people what their key cues are and how they can interfere with disruptive behaviors before they happen. Okay, so going back to the slideshow. So let's see. All right, so I want you to kind of, let's start with objective one, identifying a problematic behavior. What does that mean? What are disruptive behaviors? Anything that causes problems for you or your relationships that result in regret, shame, guilt, that whole spiral of negative emotions afterwards. That might be yelling, fighting, causing some sort of harm to others. It could be self-harm towards yourself, things that sabotage you or hurt you physically. Reckless driving, shutting down, substance use, procrastination, avoidance, anything that afterwards you regret, right? And so I want to give you a moment to identify a behavior. You don't necessarily have to share it, but I'm happy to have you share it if you'd like to throughout. But identify a disruptive behavior that you want or need to change, that you feel gets in the way of living kind of a life you feel is worth living, that is satisfying. What behaviors cause problems for you and that lead to that regret, shame, and guilt? So I'll give you a moment to kind of think of that for yourself. Okay. And now, what are vulnerability factors that could contribute to that disruptive behavior that you just identified? Well, what are vulnerability factors? Vulnerability factors are anything that increase the likelihood of emotional overload or reactivity. This could be lack of sleep, could be pain or not feeling well physically, could be poor eating, poor nutrition, not eating at all that day, eating things that make you kind of feel not so good. Thinking of your long to-do list, feeling really overwhelmed by the amount of things that you have to get done. You're already kind of emotionally taxed. One more thing is just going to throw you over the edge, right? So that could be a vulnerability factor. Stress in your relationships. If you're worried about an argument that you had with somebody you care about, that's going to be taking up a lot of resources. Or any kind of chemical imbalance. That could be drugs, alcohol, that could be not having your morning coffee. I know for me, without my morning coffee, my children should not come near me, right? They know that. They know, oh, she hasn't had her coffee yet, right? That to me is a chemical imbalance. So it could be not having taken your meds yet. Any of those things make it more likely for an emotional reaction, okay? Those are our vulnerability factors that are really helpful if we identify, right? So if the behavior I want to change is kind of being like dismissive, maybe of my kids. My kids say, mom, 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 come outside, mom, mom, mom. My vulnerability factors are if I haven't gotten good sleep, if I haven't had my coffee, and if I'm thinking about 19 other things that I have to get done, they're kind of asking me to go outside is going to make me react much more than if I've slept well, had my coffee, and I'm thinking about, today's going to be a fun day. Like, what can we do to have fun? That my reaction in that moment is going to be very different depending on those vulnerability factors. Okay, so that's what I mean by vulnerability factors. So thinking about the disruptive behavior that you identified before that you're looking to change, what are your vulnerability factors for that particular behavior? What increases the odds of acting on that urge? Okay. Third one is, what are our key cues? So what do I mean by key cues? Key cues are our warning signs. They are the things that happen immediately before that disruptive behavior. Those are the things that we tend to not pay any attention to, but they are our indicators that we are about to act in a way that's going to lead to that regret. Okay, so this is where the awareness needs to be, is what is that signal that you're not paying attention to, but that really we need to be able to catch. That is our gift of like a warning, so that we can make sure that we catch that and have a different plan of action. So this could be a thought like what the, or what a jerk, or I'm no good, I'm worthless. It could be a sensation, could be tightness, could be clenching your fists or your jaw, could be crying, could be increased heart rate, could be your ears getting hot, like in TJ's case. It could be an emotion, noticing jealousy, noticing anger or fear or sadness. Or it could be an urge, like I'm not screwed, I'm not going to take my meds, or I'm going to take extra meds, or urges to take other substances, or to say, text or email something that you know is going to be hurtful, right? There could be urges that are coming up that you know, oh, hold on, this is going to kind of lead to a whole pathway of unhelpful what we call links in the behavior chain. So what are your key cues for the disruptive behavior that you're trying to change? What can you notice or if you really think about the last time that occurred, that disruptive behavior occurred, what was it that was going on right beforehand? Or if there's a pattern of a behavior, what do you tend to notice? Is there a thought? Is there an interpretation? Is there a body sensation that you can identify as your key cue? Okay, fourth one, what's our cope ahead plan? So if anybody has done DBT, the stop skill is a big skill in DBT. And the stop skill was initially overlooked when the revised edition of DBT came out in 2015. It was like, yeah, okay, duh, that's just mindfulness. But the more that we started kind of talking to people and you know, using it, they were like, well, mindfulness is great and all, but how do we remember to stop? And we're like, oh, stop skill. So stop skill is very powerful because what it reminds people to do is to literally just freeze. It gives people permission to actually not act on the urge or the emotion that is coming up, right? I can just stop, I can freeze, I can take a pause. So that's the S. T is take a step back, walk away, zoom out, okay? Be able to kind of create distance between you and the situation that is happening. The O is to observe what is going on, what just happened, right? What sensations, what thoughts, what urges am I having? What am I about to do? What are my options here? And then the P is our choice, right? That is proceeding mindfully. That's where we get our power back to choose our response rather than reacting impulsively from emotion mind. TJ choosing, once he noticed his ears getting hot, to go back into his cell was him making a choice from his wise mind rather than reacting impulsively from emotion mind. He got his power in that moment. Okay. So thinking about your disruptive behavior, what could your cope ahead plan be when you notice your key cues? What will you do to change the trajectory of the, you know, the situation so that you don't end up acting with this disruptive behavior in a way that creates more suffering? Maybe you go into the bathroom, splash cold water on your face, listen to music, take a shower, give yourself a little pep talk. I'm strong enough. I can get through this. This will pass. Maybe you put an urge on delay. Okay, I'm not going to send this email or text now, but if I still feel this way in 24 hours, maybe I'll react. Maybe it's taking a few breaths. Nina gave a whole great list of examples of different tools that she used as her cope ahead plan, right? As her coping plan for when noticing these high emotions or these urges, she'd kind of pull from her different skills and what worked for her. Ice cubes, holding ice cubes, chewing ice cubes. Lots of people will freeze oranges and use kind of frozen oranges on the back of their neck or just kind of rubbing them between their palms. So what could you do instead that is a realistic, doable option for you, right? Saying something like, well, I just won't do it. Not good enough. That's not concrete enough in that moment when emotion mind takes over and says, oh, you really need to let them have it, right? Or you really need, you know, to react really strongly to this. What can you do instead, very concretely, to not act on that urge? So write down kind of your ideas for yourself of what that looks like. Okay, and then practice. So what I'd like to do is kind of talk you through or give you a moment to really kind of practice in your mind what this looks like. The thing that I want you to consider as you're practicing is this behavior reinforced? If my disruptive behavior that I want to change is yelling at my kids and I ask them really nicely, hey guys, we gotta leave. Can you put your shoes on? Guys, put your shoes on. We gotta go. Put your shoes on. Who's gonna get in the car first? Time to put your shoes on. Nobody moves. If I go, put your shoes on, suddenly everybody's got shoes on. My behavior just got reinforced. It can be very hard to change that behavior if it's the only thing that works, right? So if making a suicidal comment, self-harm, screaming, yelling, threatening, if those things are the only thing that work to make you feel heard, or to have somebody understand how much you're struggling, it's going to be very hard to change those behaviors, right? They work, they're effective in some way. We need to understand that in order to be able to change that, right? So being able to have that conversation with yourself or with people around you of how can we not reinforce this behavior that I'm really working on changing, right? So what I'd like you to do is to kind of think through your problem behavior, imagining a situation where that might come up, imagining all of your vulnerability factors, right, that you've identified. I haven't really slept, you know, I'm feeling really stressed out, lots of things on my mind, haven't had my coffee yet, what kind of thoughts are going to be running through my head. I don't have time for all of this. They don't understand me, whatever it is. What's my key cue, right? I'm noticing either my heart beating faster or whatever that is, my ears getting hot. And then imagine doing my coping plan instead of that disruptive behavior. And notice, this comes straight out of sports psychology. So with athletes, right? Okay, they're freaking out, they're up at bat, game's on the line, you know, it's on them to win it. You know, and they're noticing kind of the crowd screaming and people taunting them and their heart racing and they're sweating so much they can't get a good grip, right? We work through all of that. Imagine that, fully throw yourself into that, and then be able to troubleshoot. Okay, so, you know, I thought I could just get up to the plate and tell myself it's going to be all right, keep your eye on the ball, but then no, like I'm sweating and I can't get a good grip, and that starts panicking me, and now I really feel like I'm not going to be, so troubleshoot that, right? The more that you can think through, how is this going to go, what might come up, what problems might come up in my plan, that's going to help you to then practice it in a way that's going to be helpful. And really think through, you know, what could get in the way of this going the way that you'd like it to go. Okay. And once you've rehearsed it, you are much more likely to do it, because when your emotions kick up, you have already planned for that. You've already rehearsed that. You've already thought through, you know, how that's going to feel. And in that moment, how are you going to get yourself to stop and do your coping plan instead, right? So the more that you practice it and really rehearse it, role play it, whatever it is, you know, be able to really play it out in depth, that's where you're going to be able to do it when the situation comes about and the emotions are high. That's where that comes from. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick moment to really kind of practice thinking through this plan and what could get in the way. And then I'm going to take any questions you have. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and take some questions. Here's my contact information if anybody wants to reach out later with questions. Also links to my websites, to my TED Talk, lots of things about me. So questions, comments, thoughts, please feel free to ask, put them in the chat. Anyone? Okay. So my problem behavior is procrastination. It makes planning harder. Do one thing on overwhelming list. Okay. So when the problem behavior is procrastination and avoidance, right? The thing that's reinforcing that is that our anxiety goes down if we put something off, right? If I have to do homework and I can put that homework or that presentation or that work aside, initially my anxiety is going to go down, right? And so that's a huge reward. It, of course, comes back afterwards and you feel worse because now you have even less time to get that assignment done, right? So that procrastination helped in the short term, but in the long term was really unhelpful, right? And so the idea here is to be able to kind of break down what happens right before you decide, no, I'm going to do this other thing first. What happens right before you procrastinate or you make the decision to avoid, right? And being able to kind of identify those key cues. Is it a thought? Is it, I'm going to fail? I'm not going to do well. I can't do it. I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, is if there's a thought in there, can you come up with a replacement thought of like, okay, I just have to do one thing, right? So if I have this to-do list and it's, you know, 20 items, can I take just one and can I break that one thing down into steps, right? So if I need to look for a different job as one of the many items in my to-do list, well, looking for a job is like 19 steps just in that one thing on your to-do list. So of course it feels overwhelming, right? So being able to break that down. Okay, look online for jobs that might be available in my area, or update my resume, or you know, walk in my neighborhood or in my community and just kind of walk into 2 or 3 stores and see if they need help, right? Now, when I look at that, I can say, okay, finding a job is overwhelming me. However, I can just update my resume. That'll take me 15 minutes. That doesn't feel so overwhelming. I can just work on updating my resume, right? Now you've kind of broken down that key link of procrastinating was feeling like there's too much to do. I'm never going to get it all done. It's too overwhelming. I need to go and self-soothe instead, right? Whereas if you break it down so that you don't feel that overwhelming feeling, it's going to be easier to start taking steps. Then once your resume done, it's easier to send that resume along, right? So once you take a step, it's easier to take the next step. But you first have to identify what is getting in the way and what is leading to that problematic behavior. Okay. All right. Other questions? Thoughts? Okay, so working on urges to aggress, looking for a replacement reinforcer needs to come from inside me. Okay, what internal replacement reinforcers work? Okay, so when we talk about kind of aggressive behaviors, there is something very reinforcing about letting that aggression out, right? And that's what we have to figure out for you. Is it that it makes you feel empowered if you were feeling powerless? Is it that it makes you feel in control if somebody is making you feel like they have the control? Is it that it lets out emotion, right? Depending on the function of that aggression, that's what's going to help you figure out what the replacement reinforcer can be, because you need to know what is actually reinforcing about that, right? If the aggression communicates to others around you how serious you are, because if you're not speaking in an aggressive way, they just kind of overlook it, or they overlook you, or they don't really listen to what you're asking them to do. Well, then, the aggression itself is being highly reinforced because it's the only way to get your needs met. And so the replacement reinforcer needs to be twofold. If it's working in the way of communicating to others, there has to be a calm, wise mind conversation, maybe when emotions aren't high, about how this is being reinforced by the people around you. Alternatively, for yourself, is practicing in less intense ways, not getting aggressive, right? Whether that is, a neighbor does something and you notice like this surge of anger. How do you kind of not act on that? That may bring up a lot less anger than maybe when a family member or somebody with a lot more history, does something that you want to aggress over. So I think practicing in smaller ways can give you that sense of competence that you can control it, that sense of accomplishment. And now that becomes a very internal reinforcer. It feels really good when I have control and don't give my power to that other person that pissed me off, right? If I walk away feeling good about how I handled it and like they didn't bait me to act in a way that then makes me feel awful, I feel better about myself. That feeling of power and control and self-control is the reward. And so you have to look for smaller ways to be practicing that so that you can get that internal reinforcer strengthened. And then that's going to serve as the motivator in these bigger situations that are a lot harder. I hope that answers that for you. Hey, everybody. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was such a wonderful presentation. I do want to make sure everyone gets a good water break, a bathroom break, food. We got about 10 minutes until we'll be reconvening back in the main session. But thank you all, and
thank you everybody for coming. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye.